Welcome to an hour of HealthMade Radio. HealthMade is a community for natural health seekers where we educate people about common health conditions and share extensive research on the most effective natural health treatments and promote legislation that protects our health freedoms. A core concept belief is in the innate intelligence and healing power of the body, and if properly supported spiritually, emotionally, and nutritionally, it can find its way back to health. HealthMade Radio will bring information from integrative health experts throughout the world. Check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I'm your host. Today's guest is Dr. Paul Anderson. Dr. Anderson is a world-recognized authority in the field of integrative cancer research and the treatment of chronic diseases, genomic conditions, and autoimmune and infectious disorders. For many years, he has trained students and clinicians at a number of naturopathic medical schools and other higher education institutions with a specialization in intravenous therapy formulation and infusion techniques, as well as clinical approaches to complicated illnesses. His extensive background includes longtime faculty member, Naturopathic School of Medicine, Bastyr University, and Chief of Intravenous Services at the Bastyr Integrative Oncology Research Center, where he had lead research project funded by National Institute of Health. He is a co-author of the book Outside the Box Cancer Therapies, Alternative Therapies that Treat and Prevent Cancer. It's available at Amazon.com and Barnes & Nobles. Dr. Anderson is an authority in the integrative health field that I highly admire and respect. I use many of his protocols in my clinic, the Karlfeldt Center, with great success. Dr. Anderson, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me on.
I know that the subject we are going to discuss today is something that is extremely important. It almost seems like the people that are affected the most are the ones that don't really know about it. So we need to get this out so that we can make sure that we don't lose our freedoms. And I'm all about freedom, our ability to choose what kind of treatment that we have so that we can have the best possible health. So what is it that is transpiring right now that we need to be so concerned about?
That's the best place to start, I think, because just to give the biggest picture background, the Food and Drug Administration, so we'll just call them the FDA from here out, are in charge of, obviously, foods and drugs and cosmetics, et cetera. And they have had an initiative for probably about 5 years at this point that has specifically caused compounding pharmacies and the compounding pharmacy community, which includes physicians and pharmacists and scientists, et cetera, to have to nominate and recertify or actually certify many substances that we currently are able to obtain and have prescriptions for our patients and use in many forms. And the problem that's going on with that particular process is that many of these things have been used for, many of them have been used for thousands of years, but in the modern sense, 100 years or more, and very safely, et cetera. And through the hearing process to certify these substances so we can keep using them, the FDA has essentially said that most of them are either unsafe or not needed because we have drugs that do the same work or some other excuse for that. So before we get too specific, the biggest problem is that there's only one type of pharmacy in the U.S. that's licensed to make a custom medication for you, and that's a particular kind of compounding pharmacy. Technically, they're called a 503A, but that's not that important. It's important legally. And so for the people listening, the important part about this is even if, for example, there are some, say, nutrients that need to be compounded in a sterile fashion, so you get an injection, for example, like a B12 injection or maybe an IV. If it comes in a manufactured product, it often, even if it's legal, it will often have preservatives and things that a person might be allergic to. So if you're allergic to that, we have it compounded without those preservatives by a FDA-registered pharmacy, and we can have it given to you maybe in a different strength or with no preservatives, et cetera. In those cases, or in other cases where maybe it's say a natural product that is safe and has been in use a long time, like let's say curcumin or something, there may be no commercial product available from the drug world, but your compounding pharmacy might make it in a particular preparation for, especially say a cancer patient that needs a special application of it, such as say a suppository form or a topical form or something. And if this process goes through, the availability of the patient to get these items made for them without preservatives or in special forms, et cetera, would literally go away. So the process literally says if we don't approve the drug or the substance, the pharmacy would be breaking the law by having it. And so it's a very wide-reaching problem that, you know, you and I have clinics and we see lots of patients that need these things because of many reasons. It's severely restricting patient access if this goes through.
So let's, because you were talking about them be compounding just to prevent all the preservatives if somebody has an allergic reaction to a specific preservative. So you can individualize, obviously, the substance that you're giving the individual. But also you're talking about then that this would then eliminate things that's been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years and be used safely. And you mentioned curcumin, for instance. So let's kind of personalize it a little bit. You know, what would be the impact if we lost curcumin? I mean, what have you seen curcumin be beneficial for?
Yeah. So I think something, you know, that's also good to say right up front, because it unfortunately, the way the structure of how, say, natural products are delivered to the world is divided. So nothing we're going to talk about today would affect a licensed supplement company. So not a drug company, but, you know, let's say a supplement company X that makes really good curcumin. It won't affect them because they're selling it as a dietary supplement. The problem is the dietary supplement can only be given orally, for example, and it can't be given any other way legally. So we have to, let's say we want to do intravenous curcumin, which is very common, and we actually did it in the cancer research that you and I, or that you mentioned earlier. We have to have it made by an FDA-registered pharmacy as a sterile product. And the problem that you have then is if they take it off the list and make it illegal, which is the plan, then the patient can no longer get that. And so it literally removes a very useful agent. So we've seen in cancer, we have seen patients stabilize their disease, for example, with appropriately given intravenous curcumin. Another thing that we've seen with curcumin is certain types of early stage, say, cervical cancer in women, or pre-cervical cancer suppositories that are made so that they can get to the cervix with curcumin and other natural products can be very useful in the treatment and prevention there. So there's a lot of use for many of the items on the list, in fact, all of them, but some are just incredibly useful, and so they're lost from the world of being able to customize them and give them to somebody either in a different way, as such as IV or a suppository or a topical, or maybe in a strength that you could never get, from a supplement, really would hinder the care of people with cancer and chronic illnesses specifically.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to HealthMade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson, and we're talking about a subject that is actually life-saving, and it's something we need to take action on quickly to protect our freedoms. We'll be right back. Welcome back to HealthMade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson, and we're discussing what we can do to protect our access to things that are saving people's lives, natural things that are essentially harmless. I mean, it's been used safely for a long, long time. So we're talking about cancer. I mean, cancer, for instance, medically, there's a very limited amount of options, and obviously if the medical community had solved cancer, there wouldn't have been any need for any other kind of therapies. But currently, cancer is one of the, it's almost becoming one of the leading causes of death. I mean, where 1 out of 4 people are going to die from cancer. So here you have a substance like curcumin, and I know that it's not the only substance that is given as an option for people where other therapies have failed, and now FDA is wanting to take that substance away from public access.
Yes, and I think it's a good example substance because almost everybody's heard of curcumin at this point, and there are, if you go to the scientific literature, I think there's something like 45 or 50,000 scientific papers about curcumin in medicine, and many of them are cancer or inflammatory diseases, et cetera. So it is a good one as an example. And so while this action by the FDA would not affect, say, your supplement supplier where you buy an oral pill, it would affect every other form that could be made by, a legal pharmacy. So, there's, just so people get the scope, when this process started, the FDA asked for the community that uses these things and the pharmacies that make them to nominate substances, and because the FDA didn't know, what was being made, and so that seemed kind of innocuous back then, all those years ago. So the community nominated about 300 substances, many of them natural substances or compounds that are either nutrients or herbs or parts of herbs or even minerals and, and vitamins and things that are just really, and amino acids, things that are in our body already. And of the 300, the FDA looked at them and basically chose 80 of the 300 to have hearings on to scientifically validate them. And everything else of the 300, so 80 went on the hearing list. Everything else basically went on a list that said there's no merit to any of these products, and so we're not even going to have a hearing to let you even try. And just so people know, that's of course the biggest list, but just a couple of very important or very recognizable things on the list that doesn't even get a hearing. Things such as the herb alfalfa, which is very commonly used in Chinese medicine preparations, and we use it with people who are having trouble eating when they have cancer. Also, things such as ginkgo, a very common herb that is used by people. Nettles, nettle leaf, common herb used by people. And then you get to things such as forms of calcium and forms of magnesium that are very commonly used and, used by the kilo. And those are on the list, saying that they're not worthy of even a hearing, like magnesium glycinate. We use that all the time with people. So again, and of course there's 240 other things I could list, but we don't have time. So the process is really, in my mind, very unfair and imbalanced. I've been a part of the process since the beginning. Just so people know, I'm speaking from primary experience. I helped to write some of the testimony originally for many of these substances, and then I've gone back to the FDA and testified on behalf of substances over the last 4 years. And so it's frustrating because as a clinician, I see the benefit these things have. It doesn't make logical sense that a pharmacy that's licensed by the State Board of Pharmacy and regulated through FDA rules and USP rules, that would seem to be the safest place to get something made if I needed something specific. And what the FDA is essentially saying is that they would not be able to have these things. It would be literally illegal for that pharmacy to have these things. And so that's really the crux of the problem. It's not, and I've had many conversations about this since we started this whole process in 2014 or 15. And it sounds like if you just had really good science and you had really good argument, you would prevail and win. And I've been at the hearings and I've testified a lot. And what happens is it's basically, if the FDA decides they don't want the substance to be available for compounding, it doesn't pass in the hearing. You can answer every question correctly and give them all the science, and you don't get very far. So that's kind of the process, and the problem is, for all of us who see patients, the patient gets stuck in the middle. Because if I have a patient that needs one of these things and this goes through, I'm going to have, I'm not going to be able to get it for them. It's very frustrating.
And I thought that, because a lot of people, they think, when they think about natural substances, they think, well, it's very unscientific. There's not a lot of research behind it. And FDA is probably protecting us from these agents because it's unproven. And here you're saying quite the opposite, that things like curcumin and obviously magnesium, calcium, ginkgo, alfalfa, all of these are extremely nutritive substances that have a lot of science behind it, and they are actually scientifically proven to work for specific conditions. So there is solid science behind all of this.
Yes, and I think that's it's surprising, unless you're in the business of looking up, research about nutrients and herbs and things, how much resources and references are available that these things have been studied. And the natural things such as, like licorice extract glycyrrhizin, it's been around forever, but it's been in medicine, for as long as we've had medicine, and it's been in modern medicine for as long as we've had modern medicine. So there's studies from all over the world using glycyrrhizin, which is a part of the licorice plant, in hepatitis, B and C, and liver disease, and even cancer and immune problems. And you wouldn't, you might think off the cuff, well, it's licorice, or it's a part of licorice, who would look? Well, lots of people have looked all over the world because, it's in other countries, these things are actually used as medicine, like we have here until recently. So yes, and I think that's the biggest thing for people to understand is we try to believe, most of us try to believe, well, the government's looking out for safety, which is, we want to be safe. That's, no one's arguing with safety, right? And we want to do things the right way and all of that. But the part that people have a hard time believing is that the process is set up so that these things don't pass. And so, for example, there was one kind of quasi-natural substance that we were using in cancer research that was really making a difference for people. And it was a very purified form of something from nature. And the FDA said, well, there's no modern research on it. So when I testified on that, I gave them 15 modern citations just from the last few years, all studies that are peer-reviewed and published about the substance. And I said, so your complaint about there not being modern studies doesn't pan out because we have these. And they literally just said, well, we don't have to consider those. So they can kind of do whatever they want. And, some of these substances are being now, if they get taken off as a natural product that could be made by a pharmacy, for individual use, they're now being licensed for development as drugs, basically. So part of what it seems to me is taking away competition for the drug side of things. And there's at least 3 and probably many more examples of that. I can't really share which 3 they are, but there's 3 that are either about to become approved pharma drugs or are in the process. And so it's, again, the patient gets stuck.
And I think that's a great example. And I know if we hammer more on the curcumin, for instance, you have curcumin then coming in its natural form, and then since it is natural, the pharmaceutical industry, they can't really, they can't patent that. So they need to alter it and make it into something that becomes a chemical. And obviously, if it is in a chemical form, it becomes more dangerous and needs to be more regulated. So in a way, what's happening then is that whenever the pharmaceutical industry finds a natural agent that is beneficial, they financially, it would benefit them if that was taken off the market so that they then could develop a drug that is similar to the natural agent but altered, but not as safe as a natural agent, and probably not even as effective as a natural agent because it doesn't operate in the same fashion that our bodies are used to. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And if we want to stick with, say, curcumin, there's a perfect example of this, and that is that at the same time we were working with the NIH-funded integrative cancer research, we were using intravenous curcumin, but in its what you would consider its plain natural form. So it was not manipulated molecule; it was just curcumin. And it was made by a FDA registered pharmacy. Everything was done correctly. So we were able to infuse curcumin without changing the molecule because we were looking at safety, but also to see if we had efficacy. And at the exact same time, just about, a drug company was developing a fat-soluble curcuminoid, which means they took curcumin and changed the molecule enough so they could patent it. And it's a drug that's just about ready to be approved now for cancer called Lipocurc, Lipocurc. But at the time, they were in phase 1 and 2 trials, meaning safety trials. And so we were watching what they were doing, and probably they were watching what we were doing. And we got a paper on safety from their trial. And the director of our study brought it in and said, how can you give such high doses of curcumin intravenously when this drug they're developing that's made from curcumin has safety issues at high doses? And so I looked at what it was, and I said, I believe it's because of what they did to the molecule to make it patentable, but let's do the exact same thing that the drug company did, which is you do a blood smear before you give the IV, and then you do a blood smear after, and you send both to the pathologist and have them look at what they call treatment effect. And with the patentable molecule that's not really curcumin anymore, they could not go very high without damage to blood cells. With ours, even at its maximum dose, the pathologist didn't know what they were, what drug was being used. It was blinded that way. But with ours, the blood cells actually looked better after the IV, which the pathologist remarked on, because you don't normally see that with most drugs. So it literally made a safety difference to have the natural molecule. But as you brought up, no pharmaceutical company is going to make or sell natural curcumin infusion, because they can't patent it. Anybody could make it then. And that actually leads to a very important thing I think people need to hear, and it's in the Federal Register, they call it. So everything you say in hearings is recorded and transcribed. And so everything I've ever said and everything everybody else has ever said is in there. And so when we got to this issue around, well, you can't patent, glycyrrhizin from licorice because it's just glycyrrhizin, or you can't patent curcumin, but you can patent a modified version that's a drug. I said, what pharmaceutical company is going to put the money into doing that? And the tribunal that does the hearings basically said, well, that's not our problem. And then I said something to the effect of, well, why do you not want an state licensed FDA, regulated 503 pharmacy making it, but you'll let a big pharmaceutical company make, an analog? And they literally said multiple times, we trust the way that big pharma does things, meaning their research and all of that stuff. We do not trust what you do. And they said that over and over. That wasn't a mistake. That was said out loud. And they said, so if it doesn't go through the big pharma pathway, we just don't trust it. And that's why we're making we're making you guys certify all these products. So it's not a secret why that's happening. But it's, again, now a patient maybe can get Lipocurc, the augmented molecule, as a chemotherapy drug. That drug will not be available to most, unless you're an oncologist, it won't be available to you. And I can tell you from looking side by side at real curcumin and then altered curcumin, the safety is not even comparable.
Yeah, what a loss to the public. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to HealthMade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson. Welcome back to HealthMade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson, and we're discussing an incredibly important subject today. So, talking about FDA and their view on compounded substances, that they don't feel that if it does not go through a pharmaceutical company, then they can't trust the substance. But then the issue with that is that a pharmaceutical company can really not make any money on any natural substances. So that would mean that we would lose access to all these natural substances because FDA is pretty much regulating it out of existence. In regards to FDA, who are on FDA? I mean, is it a governmental agency? Is it a private agency? What kind of people tend to be on the board of FDA? I mean, where do they come from?
That's a very good question. So the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, is an official federal government agency. A lot like, say, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, is another one, and the Department of Agriculture is another one. So it's part of the regulatory environment from the federal government, and each of these agencies regulate different things. So FDA is a federal government agency that is heavily staffed by the Public Health Service, which is a part of the government, and then they employ experts as FDA employees, such as MD PhDs or PhDs or pharmacologists, et cetera. And so the structure of all this is that the FDA proper, so the federal government part, supposedly created this subcommittee that is supposed to be independent, called the PCAT committee, the Professional Compounding Pharmacy Advisory, and the PCAT committee is staffed, however, although they don't work for the FDA, it is staffed by people who tend to be either the chair of pharmacology at a university or other like places. And again, in the federal record, many of these people have been pointed out to have financial ties to the large pharmaceutical world. So it's been pointed out in federal or in public testimony at the federal level. It's not really an independent body, even though they don't work for FDA. They're doing a job for FDA, but they have ties to pharmaceutical industry. So when the hearings are going on, those people are the people hearing the data and passing on it, but their bias is extremely, I would say, almost 100% towards large pharmaceutical and not towards anything that, a compounding pharmacy or customization would do. So that's kind of the structure. So it is a federal government agency, and if people, I just want to say one thing, because I get a lot of questions about this, obviously. People sometimes think, well, maybe the one administration, one president had a different spin than another or something. This process hasn't changed regardless of president, or as most people probably know, the president gets to appoint the head of these agencies. It hasn't changed with any head of the agency, because we've been through 3 of them at this point, or 4. Hasn't changed with any president. It's just moving forward. It's in that sense, it's apolitical in that it's the FDA's agenda, not anyone else's.
So, so the financial interest, I mean, we're looking at, you're nominating all these substances to FDA, and each substance is then being heard within these different committees. The people that are sitting on these committees are then employed from, like you said, instead like a head of a pharmacology department at a university, which obviously you would think then that this individual would be unbiased, and obviously he would be an expert in the field. The issue, like you're pointing out, is that if you look at a university, where do they get their funding money? I mean, how does that university survive? Well, it survives upon companies that are then giving money for research, at that university. So if they pretty much need the assistance of the pharmaceutical companies to be able for them to exist. Is that right?
Exactly, yes. And I will say of the committee, there's different levels of that. So some people actually have been called out specifically as having, gained $250,000 in the last year from pharmaceutical interests in big pharma, even though they don't work for big pharma. And what happens is the FDA gives them a waiver to stay on the committee, which supposedly makes it all right. So you've got that end of the spectrum. Then you might have, the chair of pharmacology at a medical school who doesn't maybe directly profit from pharma, but a lot of their funding for their research, or most of it, comes from pharma. So there's really no arm's length for most of the members. Some are maybe academicians that aren't affected, but it's mostly people who are affected. Yeah. So and this is not. This sounds very conspiratorial, but this is something that has been read into the federal record as an objection every hearing, and it's just ignored. So I mean, it's not like a secret, which again, it's not, and by and large, with very few exceptions, the people on the committee either had never heard of pharmacy compounding or had never even interacted with it. Maybe they'd heard of it prior to being on this committee. So they're experts in pharmacology, et cetera, but not necessarily in the topic at hand related to pharmacology.
So we have them people that really are quite unaware of what these natural substances do, and they are then the ones that are deciding whether they are going to continue to exist or not. And in addition to being unaware, they also may then have a strong financial interest. And they are the ones making a decision on all these 300 different agents.
Exactly. It's, as I said, it's just one of the other frustrations, and so that's a big part of it. One of the things I wanted to make sure, because I know we're running lower on time, that we talked about was, just so people know and are aware, we've got this big list of around 300 items, and of the 80 that got hearings, about 60 have been through the hearing process. So about 20 are left, 18, 19, 20, something like that. But the question has always been, well, no one has invoked any of this into law. No one's pushed it forward as regulation. So where is that at? And just in the last month or so, the FDA put out a list of the first items that they want public comment on. So we'll tell you how to do that. But these are the first 26 items which will become illegal to compound. And I want to go through some of the more well-known ones just because people will be very familiar with most of these. And I'll share a link with you where you can go and a patient or a practitioner can comment and say, I use, for example, aloe vera is one of them. I use aloe vera. My doctor recommended it, and I would not want that to be taken away. Our coalition and attorneys who we work with back there have a very easy form to use where you just fill it out with your name and whether you're a patient or practitioner and which substance you're commenting on and why, either how it's helped you or scientifically why as a practitioner you use it. And we really need that comment. Now, whether or not it slows down the FDA immediately is one thing that may not happen, but we keep appealing these things. And if we have a lot of comments that are in the record, it becomes easier to appeal and say, look, you're not listening to the public. But let me just point out a couple. I'm not going to read all 26, but I'll give you a website that has them. The first one that really surprised me was DHEA, which is an adrenal and some other places hormone that's used a lot, and you can buy it as a supplement. But in the compounding world, the DHEA is often put together with other, say, hormone replacement therapy, et cetera. And that's the first one on the list of the 26. There's also many people with, say, neurological difficulties and other things may be given the active form of carnitine, an amino acid, so acetylcarnitine, and they've also denied that, and they put it on the list. I mentioned aloe vera, which is just seems crazy to people when I say it, but it's on the list. Artemisinin, which comes from the wormwood family of plants, which we use in both in infections and cancer and all kinds of other things. A very common herb, astragalus, that is used in infections. Boswellia, which is used a lot in inflammation and brain tumors and things. And then people with fibromyalgia often and other conditions will be given D-ribose or ribose for energy, and that's on the list to be removed. Green tea extract, EGCG, is on the list. Again, it's green tea's been around longer than medicine has. Glycyrrhizin, we mentioned the active form of licorice, nettles used in allergy, etc. And then substances that are used in some IV and some oral products, NAD, the active form of vitamin B3, and then NADH, which is a different form that's often used as a sublingual form. Those are on the list. And then vanadium or vanadyl sulfate, which is used in diabetes, et cetera. And then another one that if people deal with mold, they may be actually prescribed, and it's about the only way to get it is through a compounding pharmacy, is a hormone called VIP, vasoactive intestinal peptide, which is used as a support during mold therapy. And you have to have it compounded because there's not really for mold patients, there's not an appropriate drug strength. And there's others on there too, but I just picked out the more obvious ones that people know. So I think it's important for patients to know this. It's important for patients and practitioners to go, and like I say, it's a very easy portal. Now, if you're going to comment on 3 things, you have to do 3 different entries, but it's a very easy portal to work with. You don't have to, you just put your name and if you're a patient or practitioner and the substance, and then why it helps you as a patient or why it helps your patients. Very simple. And that the reason this is of time is of the essence is the comment period ends on the 4th of December. And so that's, maybe 2 weeks or less. And then FDA has 30 days in which to consider the comments and then enact this. And then these would literally go away. So from the compounding pharmacy world. So I think that's probably the most important thing to do. And I don't know on your program, if I share the link with you, can you send it out, or should I just say what it is, or how will we do that, Beth?
Yeah, so let's have you actually let's wrap up this segment, and we'll be right back,
Okay.
And then we'll just do some finishing touches. You're listening to HealthMade Radio. Dr. Michael Karlfeldt here with Dr. Paul Anderson. We'll be right back. Welcome back to HealthMade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Paul Anderson. So, Dr. Anderson, you mentioned that time is of the essence. We have December 5th is kind of the end where public comments can come into FDA so that we can protect, so we can still keep all these different substances that we seem to think that, of course, they're natural. Why should they disappear? But FDA has other plans, apparently. So we need to let them know that we need these substances for whatever health conditions we're dealing with, whether it's cancer, whether our hormonal system is out of balance, we're dealing with neurological conditions, dealing with Lyme, dealing with mold toxicity, whatever it is, we need these substances, and we can't allow FDA to just take them away from us. I mean, we have all these pharmaceutical drugs that have all these long list of toxic effects, and now we are losing things that are safe and effective and have research behind it. So, Dr. Anderson, what kind of where can people go to post these comments and make a difference?
Yeah, so the very, as I said, the most user-friendly method is to go to, it's a simple website. It's naturopathic.org is the main website. So naturopathic.org, not .com, .org. And then they have a tab called Legislative Action Center. Under advocacy, there's a Legislative Action Center. And so you go to the advocacy tab, Legislative Action, and if you scroll there, the top item is proposed FDA rule, and there's a long number after it, but this is the one we're talking about. And there's a little background, and then there's two columns. One is the list of ingredients. So you do want to comment on the list that's on the chopping block right now. But to the left is a button called Take Action, and if you press that, it just asks you for your contact information, and then there's fill-in boxes on the right, which is which item are you concerned about, how has it helped you or your patients, and then you can click on Send. You preview it first, click Send, and it goes into the comments directly at FDA. So naturopathic.org, and then you go, they have a tab on the top line, advocacy, and that has a legislative action. But the first thing on legislative action is this process, because it's the most timely thing that we need to do.
Well, and we will also have those links on our website so that you can find them there as well. Just to kind of let everyone know, I mean, just looking at this list, we've been talking about curcumin, and then also there's another substance here called DCA, sodium dichloroacetate, and I know just a patient recently of mine, dealing with breast cancer, ovarian cancer that went into becoming also metastasized into the brain. And she wasn't receiving the effect that she was wanting from the chemotherapy that she was receiving. I mean, so she was heading towards, not being with us here anymore. Single mother, and these were two of the substances that we used in my clinic in order to be able to turn her around. Now she's cancer-free, no sign of any tumors anywhere, and all the cancer markers are normal. Her children has a mother because of these agents, and this is what FDA is taking away from you. So you need to take action in order to be able to protect your freedoms. If we do nothing, we lose it. So Dr. Anderson, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we close that you feel is important?
Well, I think the most important thing is that people understand that everybody agrees to keep safety in the equation. There's nothing about this process that would lead to unsafe practices. And as you said, and I've experienced, a lot of these things have changed people's lives, especially with cancer or very bad other diseases. And the people I'm working with right now, and your clinic is, et cetera, it would be devastated to lose these things. So it's very important, and the FDA is not giving us a lot of time for comment. So I will send you the direct link that you can put out, and we just need as many patients and providers to give their experience as possible. And all we can do is that, but we need to do as much of that as we can in the next week and a half.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. I truly appreciate all the effort that you're putting forth, and let's all get together and let's protect our freedoms.
Okay, thank you.
That is it for today. You're listening to HealthMade Radio. Remember, check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it.
All right, and we're all clear.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. I really, really appreciate this, and let's get it out there.
Okay, and I'm going to send, so if I send it to the Michael at the Karlfeldt Center, that'll get,
that'd be
that's
perfect.
The right one?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just send, because we don't want people to get lost in websites, so I'm going to send the link that takes them right to the comment page.
Perfect.
And that's better.
Yeah, so, exactly. Simple actions, those are the best ones.
Yeah.
Great.
And if you, I mean, it's probably obvious, but if you and then any other clinicians in your office and or that everybody, clinicians need to comment, also, and it's the same form, so that would be very helpful as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. You have an awesome weekend and happy Thanksgiving, and let's get this done.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, bye.
Thanks, Benno.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, Benno.
Okay, bye.
Thanks.